Gentlemen, let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt genuinely energized? Not just caffeinated, not just rested, but actually alive? When was the last time your body responded the way it used to? Strong, reliable, confident. If that question sits uncomfortably, stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't another supplement pitch. It isn't a trendy superfood marketed to younger men. It's a single fruit, one that most men over 60 walk right past at the grocery store. And the clinical evidence behind what it does to testosterone and blood flow is something I wish more of my patients knew about years earlier. I'm Dr. Jocelyn Carter, a board-certified urologist with over 12 years in clinical practice. I've spent a significant portion of that time correcting the misinformation men over 60 receive about hormonal decline and vascular health. Men come into my office having tried everything: pills, powders, expensive protocols, when the clinical evidence actually points to something far simpler, far more accessible, and far more powerful than most of them have ever been told. Today, I want to give you what the research actually shows, not what the internet says, not what a friend told you at the gym, what the peer-reviewed clinical data tells us about one specific fruit and what it does inside the male body after 60. Before we go further, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you've been told about testosterone and blood flow. I want to know what misinformation is circulating out there, because I see the consequences of it every single day in my practice. Now, here's what most men over 60 have been told. They've been told that declining testosterone is simply aging, that reduced blood flow is inevitable, that the fatigue, the slower recovery, the diminished drive, these are just facts of life after a certain age. Here's what's wrong with that. That framing treats a treatable physiological process as a fixed sentence. The clinical evidence does not support that conclusion. What the research actually shows is that a significant portion of what men experience as normal aging is the downstream consequence of specific addressable deficiencies in nitric oxide production, in endothelial function, in hormonal signaling pathways that remain responsive well into your 70s and 80s. The body doesn't simply stop. It slows down when it stops receiving what it needs. And what it needs, the evidence increasingly suggests, can be found in the pomegranate. That's the fruit, the pomegranate. And before you dismiss it as something exotic or inconvenient, understand that the clinical data behind this fruit is not thin. It is not anecdotal. It is not the product of one small pilot study. It is a growing, replicated body of evidence from institutions including Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, the University of California, and the Ataturk University School of Medicine. And what those researchers found in men specifically is worth every minute of your attention today. Let's walk through exactly what the pomegranate does inside your body, why it matters so profoundly for men over 60, and how you can begin using it in a way that's straightforward, practical, and evidence-supported. The first thing you need to understand is what happens to your vascular system after 60, because this is the mechanism everything else depends on. The clinical reality is this. As men age, the endothelium, that thin cellular lining inside every blood vessel in your body, begins to produce less nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the signaling molecule that tells your blood vessels to relax and dilate. Think of it as the pressure release valve in a hydraulic system. When nitric oxide production is healthy, blood moves freely, vessels open wide, and circulation reaches every tissue that depends on it, including the tissues most relevant to male performance, energy, and hormonal function. When nitric oxide declines, vessels stiffen, pressure increases, and blood flow becomes restricted. This is not abstract. This is the precise physiological mechanism behind fatigue, reduced exercise capacity, slower recovery, and the vascular component of erectile dysfunction that I see in men over 60 every single week. Here's what the research actually found about pomegranate and this mechanism. A study conducted at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh followed men over a period of 2 weeks who consumed pomegranate juice daily. The researchers measured salivary testosterone levels before and after the intervention. What they found was a mean increase in testosterone of 24%. 24% in 2 weeks from a dietary intervention alone. The sample included both men and women, and the testosterone increase was observed across both sexes, but the implications for men, particularly men over 60 whose testosterone has been declining for a decade or more, are significant. The mechanism, the researchers proposed, is connected to pomegranate's effect on cortisol suppression. When cortisol, your primary stress hormone, is chronically elevated, it directly suppresses testosterone production. Pomegranate's polyphenol compounds, particularly punicalagins and ellagic acid, appear to reduce cortisol activity, which in turn creates the hormonal environment in which testosterone can recover. I remember a patient of mine, Robert, 67, a former civil engineer who came to me describing what he called a general flatness. Not depression, he was careful to say, just a diminishment of everything. Energy was half what it used to be. His drive, in every sense of the word, had gone quiet. His testosterone came back in the low normal range, technically not deficient by standard thresholds, but clearly insufficient for how he wanted to live. I didn't immediately reach for a prescription. I asked him about his diet. We talked about what the evidence showed. I suggested he incorporate pomegranate, the whole fruit and the juice, consistently, daily. 6 weeks later, Robert came back. He said, and I'm not paraphrasing significantly here, that he felt like someone had turned a dimmer switch back up. His follow-up labs reflected what he was feeling. His testosterone had moved. His mood had shifted. His wife had noticed. That's not a coincidence. That's the mechanism working. Now let's talk about the vascular side in more specific terms, because this is where the pomegranate's evidence base becomes particularly compelling for men over 60. A study published in the American Journal of Cardiology examined pomegranate juice consumption in patients with ischemic coronary heart disease, men whose blood flow to the heart was already compromised. Over 3 months, daily pomegranate juice consumption was associated with a measurable reduction in myocardial ischemia during stress testing. The blood was moving better. The vessels were responding. The mechanism here is pomegranate's exceptionally high concentration of polyphenol antioxidants, particularly punicalagins, which are unique to pomegranate and metabolized in the gut into urolithins, compounds that have demonstrated direct protective effects on endothelial cells. These compounds reduce oxidative stress on the vessel wall, reduce inflammation in the endothelium, and support the conditions under which nitric oxide synthesis can recover. For men over 60, what this means practically is this. The blood flow issues that manifest as fatigue, as reduced exercise tolerance, as diminished sexual function, these are downstream of endothelial dysfunction. And endothelial dysfunction is not fixed. It is responsive. The pomegranate is one of the most potent dietary tools we have for supporting endothelial recovery, and most men have never been told that. Emotionally, what I want you to sit with for a moment is this. The flatness, the diminishment, the sense that your energy and drive have quietly retreated. You haven't been failing. You've been working with incomplete information. Your body has been asking for something specific, and nobody pointed you toward it. That changes today. Let's go deeper into the third critical mechanism, because the pomegranate's effects are not limited to testosterone and blood vessels. There is a third pathway that matters enormously for men over 60, and that is inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation, what researchers sometimes call inflammaging, is now understood to be one of the primary drivers of hormonal decline, vascular deterioration, and the accelerated aging that so many men experience in their 60s and 70s. Inflammation suppresses Leydig cell function in the testes. These are the cells responsible for testosterone production. Inflammation damages the endothelium. Inflammation disrupts sleep, and poor sleep further suppresses testosterone. It is a cascade, and it feeds itself. The pomegranate is one of the most rigorously studied anti-inflammatory dietary compounds available. Its polyphenol content, gram for gram, exceeds that of red wine and green tea, two sources that receive far more attention in popular health media. A clinical trial at Ataturk University in Turkey found that pomegranate extract supplementation significantly reduced markers of oxidative stress and inflammation in subjects over a 12-week period. The specific markers, including malondialdehyde, a marker of lipid oxidation, and superoxide dismutase activity, shifted in directions consistent with reduced cellular aging. For men over 60, whose inflammatory burden is typically elevated and whose antioxidant defenses are depleted, this is a meaningful intervention, not a cure, not a miracle. A clinically supported, accessible, dietary tool that addresses the biological roots of the decline they're experiencing. I think of a patient named Victor, 71, a retired high school coach. Victor had been dealing with low energy for years. He was sleeping adequately. His blood pressure was controlled. His thyroid was fine. But he described feeling old in a way that felt unfair because he was still sharp, still engaged, still motivated. He just couldn't access the physical energy his mental drive demanded. We discussed the inflammatory picture. His C-reactive protein was elevated, not alarmingly, but chronically. We added pomegranate to his daily routine. 8 ounces of pure pomegranate juice each morning, and 2 or 3 times per week, the whole arils as well. 8 weeks later, Victor told me the physical energy was starting to match the mental energy again. He'd started walking 3 miles every morning. His wife thought he'd found some secret supplement. He told her it was fruit. She didn't believe him. Now let's talk about the practical implementation, because the clinical evidence is only useful if you know how to act on it. Here is your evidence-based action plan. First, incorporate 8 ounces of pure pomegranate juice each morning with breakfast. This is the dose used in the majority of clinical studies showing testosterone and vascular benefits. Critically, and I want to be precise here, the juice must be pure, not a pomegranate blend. Not a cocktail. 100% pomegranate juice, unsweetened. The added sugars in blended products blunt the polyphenol effects and add glycemic load that works against the hormonal environment you're trying to create. Second, 3 to 4 times per week, consume the whole fruit, the arils, the red seed kernels. The whole fruit contains fiber that the juice does not. And the fiber matters because it supports the gut microbiome processes that convert pomegranate polyphenols into urolithins, the compounds with the strongest endothelial protective effects. The juice and the whole fruit together create a more complete intervention than either alone. Third, be consistent for a minimum of 4 weeks before you evaluate results. The Edinburgh testosterone study showed meaningful changes at 2 weeks, but the vascular and anti-inflammatory effects build over time. The men in the cardiac study showed their strongest results at 3 months. This is not a 1-week experiment. This is a dietary shift with a clinical evidence base, and it rewards consistency. If you've been frustrated, if you've tried things that didn't work, if you've quietly accepted a version of yourself that feels diminished, you are not broken. The clinical evidence is clear that the male body remains responsive to the right inputs well into your 70s and beyond. Your testosterone pathway is not permanently shut down. Your endothelium is not permanently stiff. The mechanisms are still there. They have simply been undersupported. Now you have the full picture. If this video gave you something useful, give it a like so other men can find it. Drop a comment and tell me one thing you believed about testosterone or blood flow that this video changed. I read those comments and they help me understand what information men need most. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe if you want more of what the clinical evidence actually shows, not what the internet tells you, but what the research demonstrates. I'm Dr. Emily Carter. The decline most men accept as inevitable after 60 is, in large part, a response to deficiencies that the right dietary interventions can address. And the pomegranate is one of the most clinically supported examples we have. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.